Hey, what's going on, guys? I've got an interesting set of games here today that we're going to be starting. It's Kenoli, our pumpkin Zerg in the bottom right, and he's going up against a new homie, SGZZZ. I was going to just call him Zzz, because I think that's funny, but it would probably outdo itself as far as the naming is concerned. I'm sure people would just eventually get a little sleepy about it. ZZZ after all, catch some Z's. So we're going to see how he does. He is in the top left, and I believe he is. This kind of looks like Ultramarine, but it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to say he's Yemen Blue for a joke, but it's actually Zafir. That was the other color I would have guessed had I remembered that it existed, but I forgot the name. So it is going to be Kenoli going pool first into SG, which I guess is probably what I can call. I could just say ZGZ, but that would be even more confusing. He's going to go bio opener with one guy on gas. Let's see what he ends up coming up with here. That might just be a really delayed Fulcrum or something of that sort, but we shall find out. Obviously, we are still going through the backlog of tournament games that happened recently because March Invitational 2025 is coming to a close. Obviously, it's April now, guys. It's April. So, of course, we can't have March Invitational live play. But if you guys are interested in helping bring about another invitational, perhaps for the month of April, depending on how soon we get it funded, we are $75 to our $300 goal. By that, I mean $75 has been donated, has been pledged by community members. Once we hit $300, so another $225, we will be at that goal. So that is all we need. If you are interested in doing it, that will allow us to run the tournament, and then we will go from there in terms of like whether or not we have prize money. Prize money has basically been sent out to everybody, or I've contacted everybody about it. We will see if they care to collect on that. Some of them have decided to pledge it. Arbuz, Budesh, and well, I won't reveal who else did because that would be a spoiler for a VOD that has not yet been put out. But Arbuz, Budesh pledged, and one other epic man pledged. So thank you to y'all, gentlemen. That's where the 75 actually came from. All right, enough talking about my shilling. Interesting early game here from SG because he's not only got his Stockade making a Cyprian, and he's going to go for that frontline anchor, he's also grabbing a Goliath, so he will be very well insulated from the early game. The counter to this, if you're curious as the Zerg players, if you can identify that this many resources were spent on this kind of early game stuff, especially if you scout that second Fulcrum going down, but as, once you hear the Goliath and see the Cyprian and all that, at that point, okay, my guy is not going for it. He's got an anchor. He's probably not going to move across the map. I should expand, and I should droll pretty hard here. Get another production structure out, either hatch or larvosk. Obviously, take my natural, so that would be 2 extra larva production overall. So that's what Kenoli, like in a perfect world, I would think that would be the greatest navigational play he could do here. But as of right now, it might be sometime before he confirms what's going on. We are on the map Demilune, by the way. I believe the first couple of games were played on this map, so see how many we get through in this video. Also might not do every single replay that was submitted, but we'll see. We'll see. We do have Kenoli over here thinking about what he wants to do next. He is kind of notorious for floating a lot of money. We saw that in his invitational matches as well. Nebleim and I casted that. So check that out anytime you feel like it. If you missed it somehow. The Ovaleth is a great choice. I think Art of Turtle is building a lot more Ovaleths than the other players. He might be building it a little bit more often than he ought to. And now the first Goliath has been sighted. The Cyprian has been revealed as well. Good stuff there. Was it the Goliath that got the kill? No, it doesn't look like it. It also doesn't look like it did any damage. So maybe actually it wasn't seen. Could be an opportunity for SG to not be punished for his more defensive play. Now he'll go for his Ministry. It's a little bit on the later side than what we would like to see, but he's also dropping double Scrapyard. Interesting. So as Terran, there's a couple of different things you can do if you're going to try to play a mech-heavy style versus Zerg, especially if that Zerg is playing pool. We see Kenoli going for the Zerkish Shroud for now, but that is not likely to happen for a very long time. It's not like it's going to carry him into the mid-game just purely based on those units. However, if he gets Lakis out, I mean, there's no detection with this comp, right? We do have a Shaman coming, so maybe that could be clutch, but much easier to snipe a Shaman than an Anseal with the units that Kenoli has at his disposal. And those are the only 2 detectors that are mobile at this stage of the game for SG, and since no Starpad, no Anseal. As simple as that. That being said, looking at the composition here, if you decide to withhold the Phalanx, forgo the Phalanx, no Siege Tank equivalent for you, as we have another Vestry coming on down. That's one of those things where, to me, we got a Quas drop coming in as well. It does kind of feel to me like SG is going to be in a pretty good position here to just muscle through with the Goliaths if he gets there. But he totally discounted the potential for this Obelisk to do anything, had no idea that drops were incoming. Somehow, he has not lost a Mason yet, but those are going to start falling, those Paper Tigers. They are in desperate modes to try to escape. Looks like only 2 of them have gone down. A lot more have been softened up. Maybe a missed opportunity on Kenoli's side. But those Masons need to get back mining ASAP. He does not actually have anything else. Trying to chase down the Oveleth, it will end up escaping at the cost of providing those Quas for the death. But that's actually a really nice save for Kenoli because the Oveleth is the most expensive unit there. And obviously, it costs Vespene. It detects, it can fly, it can transport. He can just go ahead and send it back in later on. Looks like the Shaman has pretty much healed most of the Masons by now. A couple of them will remain a little bit unhealed, but that's okay. And the Ministry can now lift off and move over to greener pastures. Kenoli, on the other hand, has made a ton of Quasilisks and a couple of Zorius, which are still back at the base, only now leaving. And it looks like he'll try to take his natural expand now. So yeah, SG obviously does have that Ministry. It was scouted by Kenoli's attack force. Does kind of feel like Kenoli needed to do maybe even a little bit more damage. Remember, he only killed 2 workers and did stall mining out a little bit longer than he needed to. That was mostly SG doing that to himself. But overall, I would say that, like, looking at what the position for SG, it feels like he can just set up a nice little posture here. He's got a better army overall if he can survive the Zorius, right? That's, like, kind of the main deal here. There's no armor end with this comp. There's enough Goliaths or something like that. Maybe he could do something. I guess his Goliaths aren't actually with the army, though. It's just, like, Blackjack and a couple of other odds and ends. The one Cyprian, of course, goes up against the Zorius. That's not going to be very useful. And it looks to me like that Shaman will end up escaping. But now, here comes a really big counter push. Where are the Goliaths? Where did they go? Okay, here's one of them. I don't know where the other one is. Trying to cycle back here a little bit, but it doesn't really look like this is going to work out for SG. He's going to return to try to sort of decapitate Kenoli from the back end, but this pincer is really quite deadly. He built a quarry, very likely to go down. The one Cyclops, the only source of splash damage here, and those Mavericks are not stimmed. Nice pullback to the Shaman. He does have that deployed for the extra range. Not a great surface area here for Kenoli to be taking that bridge fight. And now he's trying to get on top of the production. This is where things could get really ugly. SG's got money in the bank, but nothing coming out of those. Very important stockades. No Hurricanes or anything to try to survive the Quas onslaught. So this has legs. There should be more damage Kenoli can do, as additional Masons are being made. There's one loose Quas in the natural. He snipes one of the scrapyards, goes after the next. Where is the focus from SG? It looks like he is a little bit lackluster with his organization here. Might be getting a bit overwhelmed. He's sicking on the Watchdog. SG trying to get his stuff in order and finally grabs his units and corrals them in. Looks like 1, 2, maybe 3 Masons will end up going down. Maybe a few more. Those Zorius are pretty healthy. Only now pulling those Masons away. And yeah, it looks like 4 of them went down, by my count. So that's pretty unfortunate there. Plus, obviously, all of the shutdown that he's had elsewhere. At least he can full saturate this base. Kenoli's one Quas getting drilled on and seeing if it will end up going down. But yeah, that was a very big win here for Kenoli, who's floated enough money in the backdrop of all of that to just go ahead and drop his tier 2, which is a classic Kenoli move. Not the strongest multitasker, but he was able to overwhelm his opponent. The quarry burns down, so no additional worker for worker production for SG. That was like a very faint way that he could maybe try to do some kind of comeback mechanic. Mind you, he could just try to remax his army as fast as possible and then send them across an attack. Like, there's no static defense here. The Kagrants are going to try to fix that. Easily overwhelmed, barely any units. Like, tier 2 off of an almost naked natural, completely naked main base here as far as like anti-drop or just a run-by. Means that Kenoli is just kind of counting on his aura to defend him here. SG, though, has a pretty okay military for this stage of the game. Well, not in an objective sense, but in a sense of, like, comparing it to his opponent. He's definitely got the superior army. It just feels like he's on a timer. He doesn't yet know. If he attacks right now, Kenoli could maybe be in some trouble, might end up bungling it. More fulcrums going down, but look, his production is idle. That's a really key detail here. Lots of money that is being disappeared into worker queues instead of being used for additional production structures and keeping his existing factories running. His fulcrums, his stockades. I call all of them factories now because factory no longer corresponds to a particular unit. Kenoli dropping his Mutat Spire and also going to go ahead and add more static defense to the natural, recognizing that that is indeed a weak spot where, you know, sometimes it's helpful to think to yourself, how could I lose a game that I'm already ahead in? And, you know, conceivably, realistically, you try to balance for whatever is the most likely thing there. So SG clears the bridge. No longer does Kenoli know if the army is on the way, but he's really well garrisoned pretty much everywhere. The only blind spot is over here. Unlikely that on this port of Overwatch from StarCraft 1, Are you going to see this army kind of navigate in that position? It would be a hell of a read for SG to do that. And even if he did, there's no sort of artillery here for him to really use. He's adding more scrap yards. He wants to just purely blackjack it up. I know SG's a new player. I hope that he's able to get some nice feedback and ideas from watching this. He's playing more games even today. These games were played, I think, on the 27th of March, and I'm recording this on the 3rd of April. So definitely one of those options where, you could tell he's still grinding because he's still playing even today. But we'll have to see how much he's improved since then. Another Avaleth coming in with 6 Quas, no less. Kenoli likes this move. He's got his Calculator Lake back at home in the meanwhile. He hasn't actually turned into any tier 2 unit production here. This drop much more effective at killing workers than any previous move has been. He ends up dropping what looks to be 5 workers, maybe only 4, and which would put it on par with his previous attack earlier. But now he's got 12 mutas. And of course, he's going to make a lot of Lyrilisks as well. So this is a very deadly position for SG to be in. Atlas coming down for tier 2. Conceptually speaking, if he were to mass a lot of Cyprians, he could still be insulated versus the non-stop aggression that the mutas can do. He's got a decent force over here, but he needs to get up this ramp, and he needs to emphatically shut down the 3rd base. Remember, his eco has basically recovered at this point, so it doesn't look to me like Kenoli's going to be able to do much from this position. Laquaz all rallied down to the natural. He's kind of lost track of where his mutas are, and this hatch will end up going down. It's just a question of whether he wants to even bother showing his mutas right now. Still in a dominant position, but the longer Kenoli kind of lets his prey wander across the map, the less likely it is for Kenoli to be able to actually close on this lead. A lot of idle Masons in the natural, though. SG hopefully will see that. He's a bit undersaturated in the main base after all that. He leaves 1 Maverick behind just to guard the base, and coincidentally is going to spot 1 Burrow Drilleth. There is still 1 more. Love the idea to go for this sort of thing. He pre-stims it, and he's trying to look around. It looks like this is spending a lot of time for him. He will find it, but it feels like maybe a little bit too much effort was placed into that when comparatively he's got so many other things to do. Ministry coming down for the 3rd base. Wait, is SG actually going to do something here? As Kenoli just kind of bided his time a little bit too much, because I know he's got tier 2 units. Admittedly, there's no Phalanx here, so it's going to be unlikely that Terran is going to be able to break the Lyrilisks, but they don't have the armor to stop the Cyprians from penning them. So when I'm thinking about the kinetic penetration of the Cyprians, where it does that line trace damage, conceptually speaking, it could help counter the Lyrilisks. It's just that the bounce damage and the lack of healing with this particular chunk of the army. He's only got 1 Shaman down here. Yeah, kind of unlikely that it'll end up happening. Kenoli going to go ahead and dispatch a number of Quas. But look at this point. I mean, we're talking about mantles being added to the main base. This feels like a bit of a Kenoli throw. Remember, he has tier 2 still, but his income definitely diminished, losing that 3rd base and having no other contingencies. Could end up seeing a crunch here, or at worst, SG could aggro the army to the north. Oh, he's actually going to find all the mutas. That's 29 of them. Well, 30 once upon a time. But this is where the Cyprians were, and this is where he would have actually been able to maybe do some damage to that muta stack if he had been able to do that. But now SG's like, okay, well, I guess I got to fall back. That's a huge Zerg army. Won't be able to take 12 o'clock. That Quas blocking it. No 3rd base for him, and now the mutas can go hunting for something else, or they can just accompany the rest of the army and just sick 'em, boy, all over that natural. Remember, we have Cataphracts coming. A very common trap that I think players fall into, TVZ, is they go Katas instead of Ramses in the early stages of the game. If I had to pick, do I have 6 Ramses or 2 Katas? I pick the 6 Ramses, and I just try to control them so that the mutas just die immediately. Maybe toss them in anchors or something like that. That army gets cleaned. That's a massive blunder. Well, blunder is a strong word. It's just a massive problem for SG to have to deal with. At the very least, he will have 2 Katas, but maybe not even for the big bulk of this first fight. Remember, they are slow things, and they're all the way in the back of the main base. SG going to try to get in front of his anchor. Only got 3 Mavericks in there. Probably not going to be too important here. Some Quas do end up trying to mutate in an awkward position. It's actually blocking the ramp. Kenoli, I think he should have waited a little bit longer before telling the Quas to do that. And here comes the muta stack into the main base. No splash damage here. I say, take that back. There's 2 Cyprians trying to work their magic. Now, obviously, the Mason count plummeting here for our Terran player. He is producing nothing, floating a ridiculous amount of money, absolutely getting obliterated on multiple fronts. But the Blackjack count is still pretty strong, and the Shamans keeping themselves alive. Maybe those Katas can actually do something, but they weren't rallied down to the natural. That is a real blunder. I know I said earlier, and I had to take it back because it was just a rough situation, but that one is a real big problem because SG is probably going to drop this game now. I think he's taken too much damage, lost his natural. His 3rd base, Ministry, is just going to get eviscerated. More than likely not going to make anything happen here. Only now is he starting to produce units again. His Qs ran out. That's the problem. You got to keep on top of that as a habit. And now, of course, when the Riddler Rocor's starting snaring the Katas, there's really no hope. You're not going to be able to save them forever. And the Blackjacks come out to try to be chaff. Nothing else coming out of the mantles. No, Hurricanes from the stockades to try to rend the armor so that a hypothetical Ramses could try to pen them. That's not going to happen either. So this is a wrap here. Kenoli will take the game, but it did look scary, and SG, he's got a little bit of character to him for the fact that he stuck it out for that long in a disadvantaged position. And honestly, it probably doesn't feel like he was ever in a position to really kill him, but killing that third base, Kenoli definitely let SG back into the game a little bit. And it was SG's next blunder that really cemented the deal there. He could have maybe saved his natural and his third ministry and landed them both and rebuilt the Masons. Had those cataphracts come down, GG finally going to be called. We'll go on to game number 2 in the same video, because why not, guys? Why not? Yeah, thanks for joining me for this one, and hats off to SG for keeping it in it. You know, Kenoli is a recently christened Class 3 player again, and, you know, they did actually look like... Obviously, Kenoli's a lot more familiar with the project than SG, but I think they could have done that together. That could have been a real match, you know. In many ways, it was. It took 15 minutes for Kenoli to finally bring the hammer down. So let's see what happens around game 2. Straight back into things. Kenoli, top left. Pumpkin, Zerg. SGZZZ, bottom right, and he's Zafir once again. I guess he likes that color. Or the randomizer liked that color. The randomizer is always random, though. It would never give you the same result 5 times in a row, right, Tudor? But enough about that. We've got Kenoli harvesting Vespene. It probably won't be pool first this time around, and SG seems to be doing that a mech build this time, since he has 2 guys on Vespene early on. Yep, just waiting for it. You know, I will say, the Peruvians have their early aggressive build orders kind of dialed in, right? I think SG is Peruvian. I could be wrong about that. It's just he plays with, like, P-Sense and Pingo Collator, I think, and... who's the other one? I know Sausage Lord might be Peruvian. Yeah. That checks out. So I think he's played with them all. But yeah, right now, though, they will like to cut workers a little bit, like 1 worker so they get their first production structure out a little bit faster. They like having units, I tell you that much. And I think if SG works on some of those like spending flaws where he just wasn't spending some of his considerable bank, he could be a strong player. He could maybe have aspirations. I know he's literally an aspirant Class 3 right now, but he could have aspirations to go for a a Class 2 promotion at some point. Gonna have a second Fulcrum before his first finishes. That kind of tells me that maybe he's a little bit unfamiliar with the timings, because then he queues up a Mason, which is fine, but your first Fulcrum is going to be idle for probably a little bit, right? Because you got to wait for that Vulture money. Oh, he's going to go a Cyclops. That's actually not terrible. I'm just assuming that people are going to go Vulture. It might just be that that's the unit he could afford and he didn't want to be inefficient to that degree. But he could just end up massing like a big squad of Cyclops, and in small numbers, they can beat Hydras. They can definitely beat anything out of the pool with some good kiting. And I do think SG's micro wasn't really what let him down in those situations, like, unless you count like rallying your structure as micro, which, you know, you can make an argument that it is. Coming into here, though, I do think that with the gas cap early from Kenoli, it's a little bit of an uncharacteristic greed for the Zerg race. I've seen Arbus do this as a fast seed and just try to get that Ardent Authority out a little bit faster. And that's fair, since it does end up giving you a lot of power. But I don't really know if it adds as much for the Zerg. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think it was Shopkeeper Dog, and I referenced this in a different cast as well recently. I did hear that apparently it takes about 90 seconds to pay back the investment in the Escagant. And he was talking about the Seedant specifically, I think. Or maybe he was talking about the Sieve. He was talking about one of the Ridge Caps, and I think it's roughly equivalent for all the races. There will be some nuance there. But generally speaking, I imagine it's roughly equivalent. Obviously, you lose a worker for the Zerg, so it's a little bit different, but then it's also cheaper, right? That Droleth Scout is going to fall back, and I love the concave here from Kenoli. Try to split up over here so you can try to pick one of those Cyclops. He will indeed be good enough for it, but as he funnels into this bridge, that's where things get a little bit dangerous. Good micro from SG to fall back on with the wounded Cyclops there. He's going to hemorrhage another one, but these Quads are all paper tigers after a certain point. They basically have no health. So he's committing here because Kenoli knows he absolutely needs to get some more damage to reduce the overall strength of the Cyclops. Because if the Cyclops ball continues forward, he is going to be in trouble. So he goes for the Shroud immediately as the follow-up. He is not making any combat units. The Cyclops are marching across. I think by the time they actually get there, there might be a couple of Quads or something, but they can obviously walk around the static defense that it looks like Kenoli is unfortunately going to try to work for. I say unfortunately, it's not going to protect him whatsoever. You can climb up the ramp, go around this Extremis, and then hit them from the east. See if that ends up happening. It's a Vornath with a couple of Zeths. Immediately goes for double Circuit, but actually this is going to hit before the Circuits are ready. If I'm SG, I just walk right past this. Look at that. I chance that. Yep. You need to step a little bit further away. He's after the workers. He's getting some good value. Ford's rollout's already going down. The Vulture accompanying it. Yeah, this is the moneymaker right here. You try to get another worker kill. It's not going to happen, but you disrupt mining. Still, losing 4 workers at that point when you already invested 2 Droleth into the static defense. And of course, you put down your Zorkas. You've pulled all your workers to try to defend. That's a pretty good position there for the Terran. Unfortunately, his Cyclops will probably get cleaned up. They might do a little bit of extra damage versus what Kenoli would want them to do. Still doing very, very well. It shows you, like, Zets are good, but maybe not versus Cyclops, right? Like, that's a potential little stumbling block for them. Good micro on both sides so far, although I will say Kenoli seems to be getting the better of him. These reinforcements will clean out, but... Yeah, SG was also, like, he could have maybe gotten a lot more value if he orb walked behind the minerals or orb walked like a little bit further away from this circuit, which was the one that was going to finish a little bit sooner as well. Small note there, but very nice, you know? And I don't want to talk about pressure in a game where it's just like practice, you're just playing for fun or whatever. I don't know how people experience pressure. Obviously, some people are going to experience those even in practice games. Maybe obviously a bit different than a tournament game. But so far, I'd look at SG and I'd say, besides maybe a little bit of nerves on that Cyclops push, he's definitely got that aggressive style. It gets in your face. And this is a build that I don't think gets played too much TVZ. So maybe something for our upper class players to actually take a look at here. We do have some Vorvs coming out. That's going to work way better versus the Cyclops than what we've seen so far. I love that we have SG already keeping the wounded Cyclops a little bit in the back. The one Zorius is not really going to be enough here. You see him sustaining some damage. He is going to step forward, unfortunately, into his own shots there. Might end up losing another Cyclops. The circuits will clean up that one. But the Zorius is already brought down very low, so it will end up dying here. The question is really whether SG will have any other value. I was pretty confident that it would end up dying, but actually SG does not focus it down, barely takes any damage, and so that will be a wraparound. But he already has his Lodestone and his Ministry. How's his worker count? Probably a little bit low for what it could be. Second Scrapyard coming. He's now switching into Goliath Blackjack, as well as, of course, some Hurakan Maverick. So I can't complain about that, but I definitely would have expected to see a little bit more on the follow-up. I think you can probably see that SG was focused very heavily on getting some damage dealt early, and now he's in a little bit of a tough pickle. Anchor coming as well for extra defense. Adding 2 more Fulcrums, really wants to lean into the mech. Interesting stuff. 4 Leikas on the way for Kenoli, and he's going Hydra, all on one base. Such is the value of the early aggression that SG has provided. And I assume this is for a Larvosk, since Kenoli does have a little bit more value, but he could be doing a preemptive anti-drop. SG, on the other hand, not going Starpad. No Trojan in sight. That's the dropship equivalent. Probably could go for some drops at some point later on. Yeah, it is actually going to be a Spraith and a Circuit. So this is anti-drop city. He's going to have a Lake. He might end up borrowing 1 Leikas in that mineral line anyway, which would be not an insignificant cost for that, but he could just as easily move it across. Remember, the Lodestone will provide detection, but check a look, as I like to say. I don't actually... Yeah, we don't have the display for like a... sight range tiles. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more convoluted than weapon range. It uses an entirely different system. But one of the things that is a little bit risky here is that it is on the right side. This is like a spawn imba for Terran, right? Your add-on goes to this side. So it defends the workers a little bit better on this particular position, but it's not as good for detection. So the Leikas could probably stand on the extremis right here, and I don't know that the Lodestone would actually see them. Plus, of course, you could just try to surround it and kill it if you're really worried about that. So SG had the right idea. Little did we expect to go for the anchor. He's even going to go for another one. Let's see if he can actually hold this attack. I think the Leikas are close enough that the Lodestone will provide detection, absolutely. The question is, will there be any, army units left over for it? The Masons are not going to get evacuated, but actually that attack was held off relatively well. Only now are the Masons falling away, but the Vorvs can't really deal with that Lodestone by themselves. They're rending one of the armor for it, but the Leikas end up falling back, and, well, I still think that one Leikas is definitely within range. Not sure about the other. Turns out, no, he had to step on it, and that is just fine. SG holds. He does end up losing some Masons, but that was a big chunk of the army for Kenoli. In fact, he has 0 combat units right now. That natural base could easily be absolutely stepped on, and I feel like right now, SG looking pretty strong. He will even repair the Lodestone. Does one better than on game 1, where he played with a quarry that burned down, if you remember. Putting the second time anchor a little bit further forward. I don't think he canceled the first, but it's kind of inconsequential. Vestries for healing. More scrapyards. It's really a heavy amount of basic mech, as well as, of course, the ever imperious Blackjack. Everybody loves it. It's ubiquitous in these matchups. So this is where Kenoli's going to get crafty with it. The Blackjacks over here, I like. They could be a little bit closer to that 9 o'clock position, occasionally spotting drops or what have you. The Lakers are just going to be waypointed to the bridge. He's going to try to set up a little bit of a soft lock there, but the Vultures are actually going to wrap around. First, Blackjacks are going to reveal for SG that indeed there are a bunch of Lakers. So if I'm SG here, I'm definitely going to try this Vulture run by that he's prepping for. Because I know that those Lakers, they might not actually be able to take any stabs at me. He's going to actually go past the circuit and go for the workers. Not a bad shout here if he can actually kill all of the gas workers, which he certainly can. If he wants to give it a try, he'll get 4 workers, 5 workers, not bad at all. I'd go after that ridge miner just because I'm a little pedant, but that's me. I like to go after all the gas miners just to annoy people, just to be like, hey, dude, you're absolutely gonna have to retask all your workers on gas if you want that. And he does crucially scout the Gorgs. Does he go for watchdogs? I don't see any anti-air. One of them in the natural, but that's not gonna be nearly enough. I mean, you need like probably 2 or 3 per base. And look at this, he's actually gonna go ahead and move across the map, kind of calling Kenoli's bluff. You gonna move all those units towards me, buddy? Got 2 Goliaths in production. He's queued up a host of Blackjacks. Man, a queued Goliath is so sad to me because I know how expensive it is. You know, actually, SG should have enough over here to try to cycle back, but it's really a question of whether or not he can defend the attack, right? I mean, Kenoli is going to come in relatively fast. He is on top of this, so it's not going to hold. He's not going to hesitate. That Watchdog won't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And right now, SG is in this technical attack timing, trying to clear the Lakers with army positioning, while he's under attack back at home. The Watchdog goes down immediately, barely bruising any of the Gorgs. SG is entirely focused on this attack. He's losing everything over here, and at the same time, his mineral line in the main base has been wiped. He really needed to be on the ball with that. He scouted it. He just did not respect the potential pressure. And now look at this. A Goliath and 2 Mavericks not going to be quite enough for that lodestone. He's brought his opponent down to 15 workers. Kenoli just kind of showing him a different stop on that school bus, you know? Bactylus coming behind it. Very deadly follow-up, potentially. No Phalanx is here to try to contest them on the range. I actually wonder if, like, I know it's probably not the case. Every professional, quote-unquote, Terran, high-level Terran, is free to roll their eyes at me right now. But what if you did, like, Ancial Vulture as the answer to Blackjack? I'm just saying. I don't know. Something about it that's kind of amusing to me. Probably not going to work out, but feels like it could be possible. Maybe Ancial Wraith is just better. But, you know, always something to think about. Speaking of, 1 star pad is being built, kind of in a funky position there, could easily get sniped. I think SG at this point recognizes he needs a different round of detection to deal with those very important Lakers. Kenoli is using them as a key piece to his battle here. Kind of panning over here, seeing a very, very depleted main base, and now the shoe is definitely on the other foot, right? Earlier on, we were saying that, like, Kenoli is in a much better position, or SG is in a much better position economically than Kenoli. Now it's the inverse, right? Good stun on that first lake is it'll actually end up going down. Combined might of the Vulture and the Blackjack, and a clean house there. And it looks like the Gorgs are just going to get A-moved into the natural, which is a mistake from Kenoli, but they did kill a single Goliath at the very least. Still no detection here. Neither player making anything is always a funky sight to see. He's going to try to stab him on top of it, but it just ends up dying. Oh, man, this is from bad to worse here for Mr. SG. Representing South America, I think. And I think, you know, despite this really nice concave with his Blackjacks, a nice micro-kiting back, the Cyprians actually pen the Bactyls, so they're not as terrible as you might initially think as far as damage, but as soon as the Bactyls look at them, they disappear. 1 Ancial coming, but it's not going to be nearly enough, my friends. He's going to go ahead and go for a Goliath. He really needed to get a lot more than that. And yeah, at this point, Kenoli is just going to go ahead and clean him up. Got a lot of money in the bank, but apparently it doesn't matter. Trying to take 12 o'clock as he A-moves. And SG will end up falling. He queues up a ton of his money just to see what else he can do, but clearly he did not push the oh shit button fast enough, because now the shit is... well, I don't want to get too graphic, but I think it might be running down his leg. SG had a nice advantage in the early stages of the game. It wasn't like the previous one where he was coming back from a deficit. This time around, he actually led from the front, and then, unfortunately, bad things caught up with him. Kenoli rocking and rolling. 2 games to the better at the start. So I did have a look at the other maps for this, and it looks like we have 3 Dyadic Shore games coming up next, as well as a Frosted Forest game to close us out. If we do all of those games, well, you will see them on this channel. But this is going to close us out for the first video here. And if you want to see part 2, well, definitely comment below. See if SG ends up improving, taking a game off Kenoli, etc. I know there are some closer matches, or longer matches, that I would assume are closer. So at the very least, I'll cast one more of those. But let me know if you want to see the whole set. Of course, subscribe if you're not already, because Cosmonarchy has videos every single day. And I will see you next time. GG.